All right. Good morning. We're going to go into our first remediation session, Session A. Jim Langenbach, Senior Engineer with Geosyntec Consultants. We're going to make a shift here. We were talking about PFAS before. Now we're going to be talking about chicken farms. So kind of a drastic change in topics. But our first presentation will be by Donna Cline, Ricker Lamphier, both with Terracon, and Joe Ullo, Shareholder with Carlton Fields. I'll let them go ahead and take it away. And what we'll do is we'll go through each talk, and then we'll do presentations, questions, and the amount of question time they get will be based upon how much of their time slot they used.
Thanks, Jim. So we're calling our presentation Foul Play, Chicken Coop to Critical Care, a brownfield remediation story. I'll be presenting alongside with Donna and Joe. I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the story of this chicken farm fiasco, and I'll let Donna take over on how we kind of got to the end, and Joe will talk about some brownfield impacts, incentives, and some of the community impacts that we led this site with. So for our outline, I'll be talking about the background, preliminary findings, conceptual site model, and initial remedial strategy. Donna will then go into the source removal activities and design challenges and remedial achievements, and Joe will take it away with brownfield incentives and impacts. So we were given a phase one with some recognized environmental conditions of agriculture and diesel tank. Agriculture we're pretty familiar with, row crops, maybe some citrus groves, some strawberry fields, probably chlorinated pesticides, herbicides, maybe some arsenic, and other heavy metals. The diesel tank, we're going to be looking for Table C, 62780 Table C. And for one of the recognized environmental conditions, we actually received the recognized environmental condition of a chicken farm. What the phase one said was that there was literature that suggested that arsenic was frequently amended to chicken feed. And I know what you're thinking, arsenic and chicken feed? Really? Should I be concerned about the chickens I eat? And relax, I'm not here to fearmonger anyone. I want you guys to understand that arsenic was in chicken feed until about 2011. It was starting to be phased out. Then the drug 3-nitro, which is also known as roxurone, was used for growth acceleration, gut parasite control, and meat aesthetics. In 2013, arsenic was completely banned in poultry feed and completely phased out by 2016. So our limited site investigation looked something like this. It was about 75 acres plus or minus. We had parcel 1, 2, and 3 for agriculture use. Inside of parcel 1 at that pump house, we had diesel tanks, and our chicken farm was in parcel 4. Our limited site investigation with preliminary findings was nothing, except for arsenic impacts to the former chicken farm, of course. So we developed a conceptual site model and initial remedial strategy, which included looking at the remnants of the former chicken farm. Here you can see some of the debris of the former chicken farm. We noted that there were footer structures present, likely that housed the support structures and roofing structures. So we suspected that the chickens were somewhere between these two footers, likely contributing to the highest impacts of arsenic. This is the aerial photograph from 2020 when we began our investigation. This is the photograph from 1980 when the chicken farm was in its heyday. You can see east to west, we had 4 chicken houses, and we had the residence structure to the north, which we likely attributed to warehouse or an operational center for the chicken farm itself. This is what our limited site investigation looked like at the time. You can see we had some borings, numerous borings actually, in the chicken farm area and some trailing up to the north. So our conceptual site model was as follows. It was that so we noticed also that the highest concentrations were along the western portion of the property. And so what we suspected was that there was surface washdown of the excrement within the chicken coop houses. So from the support structure, which was the main housing, which you can see kind of over here, we believe that it was washed down to the west. And then there was a topographic low-lying area to a wetland to the north. You can kind of see the jurisdictional wetland line here. And we believe that there was topographic surface flow towards the wetland, which contributed to concentrations in the wetland. Or not in the wetland, but towards the wetland. So we then decided that we saw this sort of hotspot mindset where each chicken excrement, if you will, was kind of a hotspot. So we proceeded to do we wanted to achieve virtual remediation, which would be done through a 95% UCL strategy. So what we would do would be a hotspot removal with the virtual remediation exercise. And the majority of our remediation would be targeting the highest concentrations, trying to virtually remediate and going through that iterative process if you're familiar with virtual remediation. So we broke the site into 2 decision units. The first decision unit was the former chicken farm itself, and the second decision unit was the north washdown area. What we wanted to do was an RMO1 closure strategy with the kicker that the exposure unit shall not exceed a quarter acre according to 62780 1D, I think I have it written down, 62780 680 1B 1D2. It's written on the screen. And so what we attempted to do was to use spatial statistics to prove that the contaminants would be uniformly distributed post-remediation. So this is what the contaminants look like, or the arsenic looked like in the 0 to 0.5 interval. It was very similar, 0.5 to 2, and 2 to 4 as well, with concentrations tapering off as you go down in depth. But we had concentrations ranging from non-detect all the way up to about 50 parts per million. But you can kind of see hotspot clusters here. So we attempted to do the virtual remediation exercise. After we performed the virtual remediation exercise, this is what the spatial statistics would show the site to look like. So you can see that some of the concentrations would still exceed the residential cleanup target level of 2.1 for arsenic. However, in general, this exposure unit would meet that residential cleanup target level. Unfortunately, the regulatory review process said that any quarter acre area of an exposure unit would be required to meet that 2.1 residential soil cleanup target level via 95% UCL. So it kind of made our argument moot. So we proceeded with further assessment and source removal activities because our client was developing a hospital and they were moving rather quickly. We kind of came in pretty late in the process in doing these assessments because the phase 1 was done and they purchased the property not thinking much of the chicken farm. So up to this point, we had advanced about 60 soil borings with samples from 0 to 0.5, 0.5 to 2, and 2 to 4 foot intervals. We actually stopped at the 2 to 4 foot interval because we saw soil moisture content was pretty much saturated at that interval. Arsenic concentrations, like I mentioned, range from non-detect all the way up to 60 parts per million, but we're generally between the residential and commercial soil cleanup target levels. We had previously assessed groundwater or investigated groundwater with 2 temporary wells from our LSI, and we found that arsenic was less than the GCTL. But our depth to water was 9 feet below ground surface, which was inconsistent with soil moisture from what we were seeing. So we proceeded with groundwater investigation, and we demonstrated that there were 2 separate groundwater units, and arsenic was present in the shallow unit. And this shallow unit was very confusing to us because it was almost at the land surface. We were seeing 2 co-located wells, MW2 and 2S. MW2 had a depth to water from 0 to 2 feet below ground surface, but MW2 had a depth to water from 5 to 7 feet below ground surface, and we thought this was very puzzling. And so we continued also with soil and groundwater contamination assessment, and we found that it extended into a proposed stormwater pond area, kind of contradicting that north topographic flow that we thought it would follow with that surface flow. And this was a problem because that area to the south was actually where they were proposing a stormwater pond, and there were questions on whether or not they would be required to line the stormwater pond, which would have been a very costly endeavor to our client.
And Ricker, one thing that's interesting about this is the conceptual site model really changed at this point. Because up to this point, the client was thinking, okay, well, we've got a chicken farm, we've got to dispose of some soil. We were talking about RMO1 with virtual remediation, some hotspot removal. Now, all of a sudden, we had the very difficult call with the client, which is South Florida Baptist Hospital, to explain to them that the conceptual site model has drastically changed, groundwater's impacted, and oh, by the way, groundwater's impacted right in the area where you're putting in the stormwater facility that has been permitted with the development order and everything else. And we went from the cost estimate on the initial project was about $275. Mm-hmm. And on that call, we had to inform the client that the number with the liner and everything else had risen over $1 million. And we were very fortunate to be working with a very understanding client who listened to us, digested it all, and worked with us going beyond that. But the rest of this gets very interesting, and I think it worked out very, very well.
And it was at this point, actually, that we were able to get them on board with the Brownfields program. They did not want to do Brownfield at this time because they felt there was a negative stigma associated with it, but we were able to convince them that it's actually a really positive thing for the community as well as for them.
There was a lot of debate about the Brownfield program, how to close the site, whether or not conditional closure is reasonable, all those things. And all those discussion points came in when we started talking about the dollars and cents and the realities. And it was a very good, it was a long conversation. And this was all during, it was right at the end of COVID. So we were all doing this from our homes on Zoom calls and everything else. So it was it was challenging, but it worked out very well.
So we were left with 2 kind of big assessment inconsistencies. The first inconsistency was that soil concentrations appeared to be more of a southward gradient rather than following that northward topographical trend. And the second inconsistency was that the groundwater wells that we had previously used for the temp wells were vastly different than the soil moisture content and the wells that we had just installed. And the reason for this was explained by one, we found upon doing interim source removal activities, so excavation, we found that there was a subsurface conveyance or drainage system that extended from the former chicken farm area towards the south. So where the former stormwater, or where the proposed stormwater pond was going to go, that we believe was used for drainage as well as transporting chicken waste towards the south. So you can kind of see, you can see that this is the chicken farm area, and you can see these PVC piping as well as when we excavated. So this is where, imagine the chicken farm's behind you in this photo, and you're looking towards where we're gonna excavate for the stormwater pond, and you can see all of these pipes that were dug up. And there was no irrigation in this field or anything like that this could have been attributed to. So we were pretty convinced it was for drainage from the north. And then our second inconsistency was explained by a localized hard pan, which resulted in the perched aquifer along the western portion of the property, which led to the standing surface water that you can see in the left-hand photo, and then you can see that very characteristic hard pan. It was almost like solid rock. It was very difficult to advance hand auger through. And so this was a really great photo from the excavation where you're able to see that red kind of rock. So the water would just infiltrate and then sit on top of it and fill up that pore space and lead to the conditions that you can see over here on the left. So our remedial objectives changed. Like Joe mentioned, we had a long call with the client, and they were okay with the conditional closure for soils. So what we would do would be remediate the soils in that chicken farm area, which was designated to be a commercial industrial kind of out parcel for the hospital, maybe some medical offices. And then the big point for them was they wanted an unconditional closure for groundwater, and this was to avoid the costly stormwater pond liner system. And so how we would achieve this would be through a series of source removal efforts within that stormwater pond to get rid of all of that arsenic impacted soil. So we would excavate to commercial in the former chicken farm area, and we would excavate to the residential in the proposed stormwater pond area. And there was also something interesting. We had contamination that extended off-site. However, this wasn't off-site formerly. There was an expansion of North Park Road, which kind of encroached onto the chicken farm area. So we had to end up performing excavation within the right-of-way, which is not formerly right-of-way. But we wanted to do that to the residential to bring back the contamination back onto our property.
And tying into the previous discussion where they talked about NREX and off-site, on-site issues, we wanted to have it so that way our client, South Florida Baptist Hospital, would have complete control over their restrictions, and that we wouldn't have to involve off-site parties in restricting property rights. So that was really important for us to be able to delineate and remove that contamination in the off-site area. And as you can see, the clean line there was really nice. We had to replace the sidewalk, I think, but overall, it was really good, and it helped us to be able to just, right now, I'll talk about the institutional controls in a bit, but right now we're doing a standard declaration of restrictive covenant approach.
And from here, I am going to let Donna kind of take over and talk more in depth about what we were doing with the excavation and dewatering. That one's next.
So, what Rickers led me to, the shallow groundwater arsenic from the north of the site to the south of the site. We had arsenic concentrations in the shallow groundwater from up to 200 micrograms per liter. So even though our LSI, when the groundwater was at 9 feet below ground surface, it's clean. But because we were in that hard pan layer and screened across that hard pan layer, we had screaming levels of arsenic. So it was very scary. We thought, you're gonna have to line the pond. We're informing the client, you're gonna have to line the pond. It was a lot of conversations and a lot of changes just because of that perched aquifer that we were dealing with. So again, perched aquifer, they're building things were happening quickly, and we had to move quickly. And they want to dig the stormwater pond, and this is a 2-acre stormwater pond approximately, and they were digging to 8 feet. So they need to dewater, because water table's at 2 to 3 feet right now. So we had to bring out activated alumina treatment system. We had frac tanks with a weir system, flocculation, bag filters, and activated alumina. And they wanted it to handle up to 500 gallons per minute, something outrageous. And we did it, we got it out there, thanks to all our great contractors that we work with. And we had to allow the water, once it was treated, to infiltrate on site. The water couldn't leave off site. So we had the system up, they dug their stormwater treatment system, and I think really key in the soil excavation process is we removed that hard pan layer. And by removing that hard pan layer, we were able to, this is kind of a summary. We removed 7,200 tons of arsenic contaminated soil. About 343,000 gallons of groundwater was treated. You know, again, we focused on the source excavation of that hard pan, all the way from, you know, the chicken farm area to all the way to kind of, it followed the drainage pattern along the west side of the property. And I'm going to show you, once all that was done and completed, we can show, whoops, this one. So here we are, the stormwater pond is developed, the hospital's being built. You could see it in the aerial if that was shown. But we put 4 monitoring wells around the stormwater pond, and we have 4 monitoring wells in the former chicken farm area, and all groundwater concentrations are below the cleanup target levels. So we were able to deliver, after 4 quarters of groundwater monitoring, and demonstrate we had clean groundwater. Then I'm going to pass this on to Joe.
And one thing I wanted to note was when we did remove that hard pan layer, the perched aquifer went away. So that shallow aquifer that was screaming with arsenic actually went away. We were not able to have a well that was screened shallow because there wouldn't be water in it. There would be water within the bottom kind of 5 feet of it. So our wells went back to that 7 to 17 foot range because that was where we were seeing the water table when there was no more perched aquifer.
One thing I want to point out about this is we talked about the brownfield situation. And this site was interesting from the brownfield perspective. The client, South Florida Baptist Hospital, was leery of a brownfield process that would open up a great deal of discussion. At the time, when they were building the hospital and going through this process, a lot of the preliminary work was trying to basically moving a hospital that had been in Plant City for many, many years. And so just the movement of the hospital was a big deal for the city. This is a mainstay for the city. It had been there for 50 years, and now they're moving the hospital. People getting a little bit worried about how's it going to change the land use, how's it going to change what they're doing. And so there was a little bit of concern about moving things and publicity about the process before it would be necessary. But so that was an interesting process. But once we got involved and once we were working with the city closely, it really worked out well. One thing I want to point out about this drawing is the orange outline, which turned out to be the brownfield site. The brownfield site, as you guys know, is going to be the actual site where you have the discharge, and then your site will go wherever the contamination takes you, and that'll be your contaminated site. So within this process, we ended up with multiple surveys. We had the brownfield site, and then remember, at the time when we're doing this is a open ag field, and we also had our phase 2, which showed diesel tanks in the other area, and we had a lot of agricultural activities. So as they were developing the land, we weren't sure if maybe they would find something else. So what we wanted to do was we didn't want to designate the area and the site have the same area as the designation. So this was a site, and as the orange area, which really was focused on the pond and the chicken farm area once we had delineated it, and we knew that was the approximate footprint of the contamination.
Do you have to use the clicker?
Oh, where's the clicker? Oh, got it, I think. And then ultimately, this is your site looking down. So over here, down to the south part of the site, or the lower part of the photo is your retention pond. And as you can see, we cover the entire 70 plus acres of the complex, with the stormwater complex to the north and also toward Park Avenue to the south part of your slide. But when we go to the area is interesting because it turned out to be a split area. Right, if we go all the way to the edge of all the way to the far side of the slide, but our area can only be 50 acres. The reason was because the city of Plant City that had jurisdiction over the property only had jurisdiction over 50 of the 75 acres. We would have had to go to Hillsborough County and do a separate designation in order to get the entire property designated. At the time, we knew that our contamination was focused on the western side of the site. So we talked to the client, and the client says, let's work with Plant City, and if someone later wants to designate and expand it, they could work with Hillsborough County. But it was very important to get this area designated to do the whole area and then to divide the site up. And then later, we had to get another survey, as you guys are aware, to be able to figure out where the contaminated soil is for the institutional controls. And that survey was just done probably in the last month or so. But we had a great relationship with the city, with Plant City. They were excited about the move, and they really are interested in moving the hospital and the impact on the community. And the community overall, to see this type of healthcare and this level of healthcare coming to Plant City, they were equally excited. So it was a really positive brownfield designation. It was one of the few times as well where the city commissioners actually came out to the brownfield area and got close to the area with one of the local community colleges there, where they actually had the commission meeting near the brownfield area. Some incentives. So they ended up spending over $1 million to clean up a chicken farm. If you told them at the beginning, you're cleaning up a chicken farm, it's going to cost you $1 million, they'd been like, you're crazy, I'm not doing it. But so far, they've brought in and they've sold $450,000 in sales tax credits. This is before we go to the healthcare bonus and the closure bonus, which at the end of the process, they should be able to recoup about 85 to 90% of the dollars that they spend on remediation. And other areas of the site could also be eligible if they run across contamination at later times. And then also we got Allison Amram and Andrew Zadro at Hillsborough County EPC were incredible partners throughout the entire process, working with us on the phone, coming out to the site. And when it got challenging with the stormwater, they were really, really helpful. Right now, what you end up with, and then I'll stop here so we have 4 minutes of questions, we are now going to have a hospital in 2024 that's more centrally located off I-4. The current hospital from 1969 is right in the middle of a congested area in downtown Plant City. The new area is going to include 85,000 square feet of medical office building, which had no possible way of doing that at the old facility. And this is going to give you a Trauma One hospital in Plant City, whereas before the only alternatives were to go to Lakeland or Tampa. So hopefully this brownfield to health field is going to help save lives. And that's it for us. We are with 3 minutes, 55 seconds.
Thanks. Exciting project, and really powerful to see the amount of funding that you can get through sort of these voluntary cleanup tax credits on the Brownfields program. Any questions for the project team? Come on, gotta have one.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll ask a question, and so the treatment system for the water, right? You had a 2-foot perched layer, and it was sized for 500 gallons a minute, but you removed like a total of 300,000.
There was so much clay.
So, I mean, what drove the 500 gallons a minute? Because it seemed like that was a really large design sizing.
The contractor.
Contract.
That's what he said he needed, and that's what we delivered.
This was the site redevelopment contractor. They
Yes.
were also digging into the water table because they wanted to remove the clay out of the bottom of the stormwater pond and put some better fill material in for infiltration.
Okay, so they were using it also for the deeper dewatering.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense with that clarification. Thank you. Any?
Hi. Oh, sorry. You want to go first?
Oh, in the back. She was queued up and ready.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Jane Williams. I'm with Optum Environmental. My question is, with the chicken feed, were there any other contaminants that you guys looked at besides the arsenic?
We also looked at nitrates, and then we also did some other testing. I'm not too familiar off the top of my head. That was from the LSI, which was performed kind of by other people within our group. But we did look at nitrates and nitrites, kind of with waste. And I think we also looked at phosphorus, and none of those were above any sort of regulatory level.
Sir?
Yeah, I was, again, related to the treatment system that you had, you used activated alumina to absorb arsenic. What do you do with the alumina after the treatment?
Yeah. It was disposed of at a landfill, Class 1 landfill.
Landfill.
Yes, sir.
So we had to get it tested for like flash point and all of the landfill requirements, but the class 1 took it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next